My name is Tyler Powell, and we're going to be going over the community member's perspective of the death penalty. A bit of an introduction is that the death penalty should deter, or at the very least, make someone second guess whatever they plan on doing. There's a lot of checks and balances that goes along with the death penalty. You have your Court of Appeals, and just a lot of things that people can do to make sure that we are actually executing those who should be executed. If the government's going to sit there and say that somebody needs to be put down, they need these checks in place to make sure that we have the right people. The Supreme Court has made rulings that determine how far the states can actually go, but when you actually get in depth into it, they left a lot of the matter to the states. The states have a lot of power when it comes to executing their prisoners. And as most things, there are issues with the effectiveness of the death penalty. Some court cases that go hand in hand with the death penalty is Atkins v. Virginia. The Supreme Court decided that the mentally ill cannot be executed under any circumstances. In Roper v. Simmons in 2005, they prohibited the execution of anyone under the age of 18 years old. In 1974, the Supreme Court decided in Coker v. Georgia that the punishment of the death penalty is not proportionate to the crime of raping an adult. And then in 2008, Kennedy v. Louisiana, it was a very similar case compared to Coker v. Georgia. The only instance is, and instead of raping an adult, they were raping a child, and they actually said that it was not proportionate as well. Data sources and measurements of variables. I used Chad Prather. He's an entertainer, and Party Foul Steve. He's a podcast personality. I reached out to them via Facebook and asked if they would post the link to the survey so that way I can collect as many surveys as possible. And I was able to get 1,444 people to take my survey. The first question that was asked is, what is your gender? And they were given the option of male, female, or prefer not to say. And then, what is your age? They were given ranges of their age that they would choose their corresponding age. And of course, you had, what is your race? They were given, white, African American, Pacific Islander, that kind of thing. Then they were given, asked, what is your ethnicity? And they were given either Hispanic or non-Hispanic. What is your marital status? They were given divorced, widowed, single, married. Do you have children? They were given yes or no. What is your political affiliation? Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Independent, or other. The main questions of the body are, they were given statements, and they had to choose whether they agree, strongly agree, unsure, disagree, or strongly disagree. The statements are, I support the use of the death penalty in the United States. The threat of the death penalty is effective in stopping individuals from committing homicides. The death penalty should be an option for all violent crimes, not just those who result in the death of the victim. The use of lethal injection is a humane form of execution. I believe the use of the death penalty is unconstitutional. Executing offenders brings closure to the victim's family members. The death penalty should be applicable to juvenile offenders, those younger than 18 at the time of the offense, who have killed somebody, and states should be allowed to execute inmates in whatever manner they choose: lethal injection, electric chair, gas chamber, firing squad, etc. My hypotheses were, for my first one, is those with children will oppose the death penalty in cases where the defendant is a juvenile. My second one is females are more likely to oppose the use of the death penalty in capital offenses. And then my third hypothesis were Democrats are more likely to view the death penalty as unconstitutional. This is just going to be a quick overview of the results. For the first statement, I support the use of the death penalty in the United States. 85% of the people agreed with that. The threat of the death penalty is effective in stopping individuals from committing homicide. 50% agreed, but then there was 20% who were unsure. The third one, the death penalty should be an option for all violent crimes, not just whose results in the death of the victim. 55% of the people agreed with that. The use of the lethal injection is a humane form of execution. 90% agreed with that one. I believe the use of the death penalty is unconstitutional. 96% disagreed with it. Executing offenders brings closure to the victim's family members. This one got a lot of mixed responses, with the majority of the people were unsure of it. The death penalty should be applicable to juvenile offenders, those younger than 18 at the time of the offense, who have killed somebody. Again, this one received mixed responses, with most people unsure. States should be allowed to execute inmates in whatever manner they choose, whether it be lethal injection, electric chair, gas chamber, firing squad, etc. 67% agreed. Now I'm going to switch over to look at the descriptive statistics. For the first question, we had 359 males, 1,067 females, 18 prefer not to say. Standard deviation is going to be at 10.8. For the age, standard deviation is going to be 15.37. These are all the numbers for the sake of time. I'm not going to go through it, but y'all can look at it here. For race, the standard deviation is 6.08. Again, look at the numbers, with the majority being white who took the survey. For ethnicity, you had 53 Hispanics with 1,350 non-Hispanics, with a standard deviation of 16.12. Marital status, we had a majority of the people being married, with 842, with 318 divorced, standard deviation of 7.23. Majority of the people who took the survey had kids, standard deviation of 9.25. Political affiliation, 933 were Republicans, 215 were independent, 52 were Democrats. Standard deviation on that is going to be 8.45. And these go into our actual questions. For the first questions, do you support the use of the death penalty? Standard deviation for that is 4.45. For the second question, standard deviation is going to be 5.18, with a majority of the people agreeing with it. And this is the question. The next question is about all violent offenses. Standard deviation is 5.74, with a majority of the people agreeing with it. Whether the death penalty was a humane form of, or go back and look at that question. The use of lethal injection is a humane form of execution, 90% agreeing. Standard deviation of that is 5.63. I believe that the death penalty is unconstitutional. Standard deviation for that one is 5.78. Of course, most people strongly disagreed with that one. Whether that the death penalty brought closure to the family, again, most people were very unsure about this one. But the standard deviation of that one is 5.75. Executing a juvenile offender, standard deviation of that one was 5.75, with, again, a good chunk of them unsure of it, and with a mix of the responses. The manner of execution, standard deviation of 7.19, the majority of the people agreeing. All right, my hypotheses and the results. For my first hypothesis, I stated those with children will oppose the death penalty in cases where the defendant is a juvenile. The data actually showed that those that have children are far more likely to oppose the use of the death penalty if the defendant is someone under the age of 18 years old. My second hypothesis, females are more likely to oppose the use of the death penalty in capital offenses. This was actually disproven, and I was extremely surprised by this. From my results, there was little opposition of the death penalty in general. A majority of people completely agreed with it. Hypothesis 3 stated Democrats are more likely to view the death penalty as unconstitutional. Percentage-wise, I broke it down, and it was actually pretty accurate. There weren't very many Democrats who took the survey, but when I broke it down in percentage, I could see that there was a higher percentage of Democrats who believed that the death penalty was unconstitutional. Policy recommendation: what good's a punishment if it doesn't deter the crime being committed? Personally, I think that the issue with the death penalty is when someone gets put on death row, it's taking 15 plus years in order to execute. I believe there was actually someone executed last week. Read an article on it. Might have been a little bit longer ago, but he was on death row since the early 90s. And that's what, 30 years. So if we were to reduce this time, I think it would be more of a deterrent in committing crimes, because right now you could still live a life in prison. I mean, that's better than nothing. The manpower and funding for this, in order to execute them sooner, would be pretty high, because you'd have to create a whole new department. Because back to what I was saying in the introduction, is you want to make sure you have the right guy. And that's a big thing, because once you execute somebody, there is no going back. It's final. And in order to make sure that we execute the right person, we would have to open up a new division of the courts in order to, again, review the case and make sure that we 100% get everything by the book and everything is pointing to this guy. And just to make sure that we have everything, all of our ducks lined up in a row. Because again, it's extremely important that we execute the right person. I know back in the 70s, we didn't have DNA and stuff like that. Now we're coming to find out that we executed people who didn't commit the crime. Like, that's a big problem. But back to the manpower and funding, the cost of having an inmate on death row for 30 years is high, because you got to put clothes on him. You have to feed him, a roof over his head. He's taking up space. He's taking up electricity. And if we were to add up that 15 to 20 years and the cost that it would take to house him, it would easily be able to fund a new division of the court that would be able to review this. The only issue with this recommendation is that in order to determine the actual effectiveness of this policy, it would take, I estimate, about 20 years in order to get a good reading, because you would have to redo a survey to see if it actually had any effect on the effectiveness. And this kind of policy, it's not going to be seen right away. You're not going to sit there and expect results overnight. It's one of those things that it's for the long run. It's not meant for just, oh, look, in a week we're going to be able to see results. That's not going to happen. These are my references, and thank you for your time.